trying to bury my daughter right now. These balloons could have been for her 14th birthday, not her death.
There was a fight between...
Ones are remembering 13-year-old Riley DeArmas, who police say was stabbed to death by a 10-year-old boy. Those close to her gathered this afternoon to pay tribute. Orko Manna spoke to the girl's mother about her push for justice.
The family of Riley DeArmas gathered here tonight not only to remember her, but to also share what they say happened before she was stabbed and killed. As the sun set tonight in northwest Houston, close to 100 loved ones came together to honor the life of 13-year-old Riley DeArmas.
Every single day, every time I pray, I'll be missing you.
A sea of balloons, many purple, Riley's favorite color, and warm embraces filling the crowd. Family members identifying Riley as the girl who was stabbed to death at an apartment complex on Grow Lane around 8 p.m.
Purple
Wednesday.
Balloons. Hundreds of them, rising slowly into the Houston sky while nearly 100 people stood below, holding each other, crying, unable to let go. But this was not a birthday party. Riley DeArmas would have turned 14 the following month. Instead, her mother stood in that crowd, watching those balloons disappear into the sky, burying a child she never got the chance to see grow up. Riley was 13 years old, stabbed, gone. And the person police say is responsible? A 10-year-old boy. Let that sink in for a moment. A child, allegedly killed by another child, in the middle of a massive street brawl involving nearly 30 people on a Wednesday night in Houston, Texas. But here's the question that will follow this case for a very long time. Was it really self-defense? Or is there something about that night that we still don't fully know? Before we get into this, I need to know what you're thinking right now. Drop a comment below. What is your first reaction hearing that a 10-year-old is at the center of a murder case? Seriously, I read every single comment on this channel. And if you are new here, hit that subscribe button. Stories like Riley's are exactly why this channel exists, to make sure the truth gets told. Now let's get into it. Before we talk about what happened that night, you need to know who Riley DeArmas was. Not the headline, not the victim, the girl. Riley was 13 years old, a student at Dean Middle School in Houston, Texas. By all accounts, she was the kind of kid who lit up a room without even trying. Her mother, Ashley DeArmas, described her in one word: joyful. Not just happy, joyful. There is a difference. Happy is a mood. Joyful is who you are at your core. Riley was free-spirited. She moved through life on her own terms. She loved to dance. She loved to sing. If you have ever known a kid like that, the one who is always humming a tune, always moving, always full of life, that was Riley. Her favorite color was purple. That detail matters, because when her family and friends gathered to remember her, nearly 100 of them showed up holding purple balloons. Not because someone told them to, but because they all knew. They all knew that purple was her color. That is the kind of girl Riley was, not the kind whose personality was so specific, so real, so her, that even in grief, the people who loved her knew exactly how to honor her. Her aunt, Megan DeArmas, stood in that crowd of mourners, surrounded by purple, and said something that is very hard to forget. I will never get a chance to hug her, to tell her I love her, because her life was just cut so short. Read that again. She will never get to hug her niece, never get to say I love you one more time. Because Riley's life, a life full of dancing and singing and the color purple, was cut short at 13 years old. And her mother, Ashley, was not just grieving. She was heartbroken in a way that only a parent can understand. She said,
Trying to bury my daughter right now. These balloons could have been for her 14th birthday, not her death.
There was a
"Instead of me
fight between
celebrating her 14th birthday, I'm celebrating and trying to bury my daughter right now. These balloons could have been for her 14th birthday, not her death. She did not deserve it. She did not deserve to die." Riley DeArmas was not just a name in a news report. She was somebody's everything. Houston, Texas, February 19th, 2026. It was a Wednesday night. It's the kind of night that starts like any other. Ordinary, unremarkable, nothing to warn you about what is coming. By 8 p.m., that would all change. Near the intersection of Grow Lane and Dow Road, there is an apartment complex. Just a regular neighborhood, regular buildings, regular people going about their evening. But that night, something was building outside those apartments that would end in tragedy. A large group of people began showing up at the complex. Not a few, not a handful. According to Houston police, somewhere between 20 and 30 people arrived at that location. That is not a small disagreement between neighbors. That is a crowd. And crowds like that, fueled by whatever tension had been building before that night, rarely end quietly. What followed was a massive brawl. Two groups clashing outside the apartment complex. Shouting, chaos, fists. The kind of scene that draws people in and pulls them deeper before they even realize how dangerous things have become. In the middle of all of that chaos was Riley DeArmas, a 13-year-old girl who should have been home that Wednesday night, maybe dancing in her room, maybe singing along to her favorite song. Instead, she was there. And then in the middle of that brawl, Riley was stabbed, at least once. That is what investigators confirmed. One stab wound. That was all it took. When Houston police officers arrived at the scene, they found her, a young girl, bleeding, fighting for her life outside that apartment complex. The Houston Fire Department paramedics rushed to her side and did what they could right there on the scene. Then they loaded her into an ambulance and raced to the nearest hospital, her lights flashing, every second counting. But sometimes, seconds are not enough. Riley DeArmas was pronounced dead at the hospital, 13 years old, a dancer, a singer, a girl whose favorite color was purple. Gone, just like that, on an ordinary Wednesday night in Houston. For her mother Ashley, for her Aunt Megan, for every single person who loved Riley, the world stopped in that moment. A phone call, a knock on the door. However the news arrived, nothing would ever be the same after it did. And for the Houston Police Department, the work was just beginning. Because as officers secured the scene and started talking to witnesses, what they discovered next would stop them in their tracks. Among the chaos of that night, among the 20 to 30 people involved in that brawl, police spoke with two people, an adult woman and a young boy. Deets, that boy, told police that he was the one who stabbed Riley. He was 10 years old. Let that land for a second. The person who walked up to Houston police officers that night and said, "I did it," was a child. A 10-year-old boy, not a teenager, not an adult, a child who is still in elementary school. At the scene, officers spoke with two people, an adult woman and the young boy, and it was the boy himself who told police what happened. He did not run. He did not hide. He turned himself over to law enforcement and gave them his account of that night. His story? Self-defense. According to the boy, Riley and the large group she came with had shown up at that apartment and started attacking people there. He claimed that in the middle of that violence, he grabbed a knife and stabbed Riley to protect himself. That was his version. Your Houston Police Lieutenant Larry Croson addressed the media at a press conference and laid out what investigators had learned. He confirmed that the group Riley was with, numbering between 20 and 30 people, had come to that apartment location and began assaulting people. According to Lieutenant Croson, the stabbing happened in the middle of that confrontation. The boy was detained that Wednesday night, but by the next day he was released, pending further investigation. Now here is where the story splits in two directions. Because while police were presenting one version of events, Riley's mother, Ashley DeArmas, was standing firmly on the other side, and she was not staying quiet. Ashley rejected the self-defense claim completely, wherein she looked into the cameras and said what every mother in her position would need the world to hear.
Straight about Riley.
Was not a violent person. She would never harm anyone intentionally. The narrative that's going around right now about my daughter, that was not Riley.
She
The
was not a
10-year-old
violent
boy was...
person. She would never harm anyone intentionally. The narrative that's going around right now about my daughter, that was not Riley. Think about what Ashley is dealing with in that moment. Her daughter is gone. And now, on top of the grief, she is watching a story spread that paints Riley as an aggressor, as someone who brought this on herself. And Ashley is saying loudly and clearly, that is not who my daughter was. 2 stories, 1 night, and the truth somewhere in between, still being pieced together by investigators. Lieutenant Croson made one thing very clear at that press conference. He acknowledged the weight of the situation, a 10-year-old at the center of a homicide case, and he did not sugarcoat it. Or it's a 10-year-old, he told reporters. That is the minimum age of criminal responsibility in the state of Texas. So charges could be filed. That'll be up to the district attorney. The Harris County District Attorney's Office confirmed they would make a decision on charges once police wrapped up their investigation. But that decision would not be simple, not even close. And this is exactly where I want to stop and hear from you. Do you believe a 10-year-old can act in genuine self-defense? Or do you think there is something more to this story that we are not seeing yet? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. This case has people completely divided, and I want to know where you stand. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is a good time. Stay with me, because it gets even more complicated from here. So what actually happens now? That is the question everyone is asking. A 13-year-old is dead. A 10-year-old says he did it, and the entire state of Texas is left trying to figure out what justice even looks like in a situation like this. Let's start with the law. In the state of Texas, the minimum age of criminal responsibility is 10 years old. That means that legally, a child who is 10 can be held accountable for a crime. It does not happen often, but the law allows for it. And in this case, that law is now front and center. The Harris County District Attorney's Office confirmed that they would be making a decision on whether to file charges, but only after Houston police completed their full investigation. That means detectives were still out there talking to witnesses, tracking down anyone who was present during that brawl. It's in reviewing any available video from the area that night. Every piece of information collected would land on the DA's desk. And then came the harder question. Even if charges are filed, what do you actually do with a 10-year-old? Rebecca Ramirez Barnes, a training specialist with the Prairie View A NM Juvenile Crime Center, spoke directly to that issue. She pointed out something that a lot of people do not think about when they call for a child to be locked up. She said, "You don't want to put a 10-year-old in a detention facility with 16-year-olds. Then this young person is going to be exposed to more delinquent behavior. That is a real problem with no easy answer. Putting a child that young into a detention setting does not just punish them. It potentially shapes them into something far worse, whereas the system was not built with 10-year-olds in mind." And yet, here we are. On one side, you have Riley's family, a mother and an aunt, and nearly 100 people who released purple balloons into the sky demanding that her life be valued, demanding that someone be held responsible. On the other side, you have a child, a 10-year-old boy, whose future now hangs in the hands of prosecutors, investigators, and a legal system that is genuinely not sure what to do next. There is no clean answer here. There is no outcome that brings Riley back. There is no courtroom verdict that makes Ashley DeArmas whole again. What there is an investigation still unfolding, a DA's office still deciding, and a community left sitting with a grief that has no easy place to go. The Saturday after Riley died, nearly 100 people showed up. Family, friends, neighbors. People who loved her, and people who simply couldn't stay home knowing what had happened to a 13-year-old girl in their city. They gathered together, and they brought purple, Riley's color, in the form of balloons. Hundreds of them held in the hands of people whose hearts were completely broken. And then they let them go. They watched those purple balloons rise up into the Houston sky, one by one, until they disappeared. It was the kind of moment that does not need many words. The kind of moment where you just hold the person next to you and cry. Ashley DeArmas stood in the middle of all of it, a mother doing the most painful thing a parent can ever do. And she spoke. She said, "Instead of me celebrating her 14th birthday, I'm celebrating and trying to bury my daughter right now. These balloons could have been for her 14th birthday, not her death. She did not deserve it. She did not deserve to die." There is nothing to add to that. Those words say everything. Her aunt, Megan DeArmas, also spoke. And what she said was simple, quiet, and absolutely devastating. "I will never get a chance to hug her, to tell her I love her, because her life was just cut so short. No more hugs. No more I love yous. No 14th birthday. Just purple balloons floating away into the sky, carrying with them the memory of a girl who loved to dance, loved to sing, and had her whole life ahead of her. Riley DeArmas was more than a headline. She always will be." Now, before we close out, let's talk about something important. Because as heartbreaking as Riley's story is, it did not happen in a vacuum. And if we walk away from this without asking the harder questions, then we have not done right by her. So let's ask them. How does a group of 20 to 30 people, including children, end up outside an apartment complex on a Wednesday night, ready to fight? Where were the adults? Where was the intervention before things reached that point? Because by the time fists are flying and weapons are out, it is already too late. That is the first takeaway. Conflict does not start with a stabbing. It starts long before that. It starts with a disagreement that nobody stepped in to resolve. It starts with a group of young people who felt like showing up and fighting was the only option available to them. Adults in these communities, parents, neighbors, teachers, have a role to play before things ever reach that level. When the second takeaway is about group dynamics. There is something about being in a crowd that makes people do things they would never do alone. 20 to 30 people moving together creates a kind of energy that is very hard to stop once it gets going. Teaching young people to step back from that, to not follow the crowd into dangerous situations, is one of the most valuable things we can do for them. And the third takeaway is about the system itself. This case has exposed a very real gap in how we handle situations involving very young children who end up on the wrong side of the law. A 10-year-old should never be in a position where he is holding a weapon. That is a failure that happened long before that Wednesday night. Riley deserved better. That boy deserved better. Every child in that situation deserved better. Yet we owe it to all of them to do more, earlier, and together. We started this story with purple balloons rising into a Houston sky, and we end it the same way, with the image of a mother who should have been planning a birthday party, instead planning a funeral, with an aunt who will never get that last hug, with a community that gathered in grief, holding purple, letting go. Riley DeArmas was 13 years old. She loved to dance. She loved to sing. She had a favorite color and a smile that the people who knew her will never forget. She would have turned 14 next month. She deserved that birthday. If this story moved you, share it. Not for the views, not for the algorithm, but because Riley's name deserves to be spoken. She deserves to be remembered not just as a victim, but as a daughter, a dancer, a girl who loved the color purple. Acts like this video. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me what part of this story hit you the hardest. I read every single one, and I will see you in the next one where we cover another story that the world needs to hear.